League of Legends came out in 2009, and yet in 2016, approaching 7 years later, there is still no replay system within the game, nor any reasonable expectation that there ever will be one in the esports lifespan of this game. And when you bear in mind a number of games, not including sequels, at most in esports have only tended to last. We're talking top end like 11, 12 years if they really get extended. So League may already be over halfway through its lifespan, if not more, depending on the fact that there might be a sequel to League of Legends, or if the casual game dies off. We've seen from the way Riot's esports model works, and the fact they don't make that much money off esports, that the competitive scene can die based on the health of the casual game. So it seems at this point like a reasonable thing to state that there probably never will be replays in League of Legends, or demos as we call them in CSGO. It's the same concept. So what's crazy about this is, first of all, historically, replays and demos have been a huge part of the scene of all the core games. So think of like Counter-Strike, the Quakes, Brood War, Warcraft 3. These were the original way that people either watched a match, because not all tournaments could be watched online or live, and streams didn't exist in the early days in many respects. So either it's the way you watched live, or it was the equivalent of the VOD. There was no stream, and therefore there was no video on demand. Therefore, what you do is, to watch a game that you weren't able to watch live, or an old game, you would just go and you would download the replay or the demo, depending on whether it's a MOBA or an RTS or an FPS. You download it, you play it through your client, and that was how you would enjoy the game. So this is actually an integral part of the history of games. And it's also a big deal because you end up in a scenario where the benefit of that is I can go back now, and as long as I can find a website that still hosts it, I can watch a game from a Quake tournament in 2000, and I can watch a match there, and I can go watch another match, and I don't have to rely upon a VOD existing, a VOD still being up, because what would happen with some of those VODs if they still had existed in Quake, if those tournaments had streams back then, is what's happened to League of Legends now. A company would go bust and their YouTube channel would never be updated, or in the case of League of Legends, some of the games from Season 1 were hosted on Owned. They weren't hosted on Twitch. Therefore, those VODs never made it to YouTube. To this day, some of those games do not exist on YouTube. Or maybe it's like the OGN scenario, where the first 2 seasons of OGN Champions are not on YouTube. They aren't even actually on OGN's Twitch in English, because they did cast them in English, but they hosted them on a different site. There used to be a site called OGNLOL.net, I think it was, or something. So replays actually also help out in the competitive scene, just in terms of having another way to watch the game and having an alternative in case the VOD goes missing. Also, you got to add in, when you're talking about replays in the history of the game, well, this was a huge part of the history of Warcraft 3. In fact, one of the most famous Warcraft 3 sites, Warcraft 3 Replays, that everyone used to go to and watch all the games for their favorite players and the big stars and get all the games to watch. This was, I mean, remember, Warcraft 3 is the grandfather of League of Legends. Dota's obviously the father, because it's the custom map in Warcraft 3, but Warcraft 3 is essentially the game that spawned League of Legends if you go back far enough in the lineage. And yet, its grandchild does not possess the same qualities that you had in any of those other games. Because of the lack of replays, it's actually impossible for normal people, everyday people without access to Riot servers, to track every stat or rip them directly from a replay and use some sort of replay or demo parsing tool to get the stats. Now, this is a big deal because there's so many games go on, and there are websites like Esportspedia, like esports wikis now, like obviously in other games we have different stats websites that ideally want to get demos and just pass them through a tool and then have all the stats for everyone and put them into databases. Instead, a lot of people won't know this, but even as recently as Season 4, Season 5, and in fact to this day, depending on the website, there are a number of huge websites which track stats, and individuals who do stats and have stats databases that they are maintaining either themselves or volunteers doing it by hand. They're literally watching games and writing down, like in the old-fashioned way of how they used to do basketball games on the box score. They're writing down every single stat. So guess what? That's not going to be perfect. Sometimes they can't get to all the stats because of the fact that, like, for example, famously in League of Legends, when you show it competitively, you take away the scoreboard at the end when they have the fight at the fountain, so you have to slow it down and go frame by frame and figure out who got that assist and who got that kill. Think about how complicated this is making it compared to just being able to rip the stats from a replay, or having access to the stats database. By the way, another little detail about Riot there. Riot has stats to most of these things from their servers, but you know what? They don't share access to those databases with everyone else. Like personally, I couldn't get access to that database. Other journalists can't get access to that database. People who work with Riot, commentators, if they're working with Riot on their event or their league, can maybe request certain stats, get access in that way, but otherwise, Riot actually hoards all that data, all that information, and doesn't give it elsewhere. So much for Riot and their altruism, for how they want to help other people and alternatives and help the scene grow, etc. They don't give a fuck in that particular sense. They own that data. That's their mind. That's their world. And the rest of us, well, we're not Riot, so we don't get any of it. So actually, replays would undermine that for them, right? But then again, it would help everyone else. By not having replays, you can't access a single player's entire game in a competitive match. You can't know what he did at all times in that game, aside from looking at the minimap. You can't see it in specific and see all the actions he made. Now, the reason why this is key is that because I know for people like me who attempt analysis or just want to write stories about people and know like the style of play of a player, my system in other games, Quake, StarCraft to a degree, because obviously you can get the games for that, and well, obviously Counter-Strike, was I used to get demos and I would play them on fast forward and I would watch everything the player did. And what I would do is I would be making some small notes on general tendencies. And because I was watching it on fast forward and I was watching the entire game, I could watch, say, 30 games in a row, and because on fast forward it'd go quicker. And after 30 games, I know in every scenario what his general tendency is. And then if I want to find specifics, I can go back to a specific game and go, right, you did something different here. Note what that is, note what the difference is. And as a result, I can produce a really good kind of journalist's scouting report where I can talk about what this guy's strengths are, what his tendency is, what his decision making is. I can make some guesses as to his psychology as a player, of what he wants to do in the game, how he conceptualizes himself within the team. If I watch a League of Legends VOD and there's no replay exists, as there isn't, I can only see him for the times when he's on the camera. So sometimes I can't see when he got a particular kill. I can't see what he did. Sometimes they go off the lane as the guy then starts CSing better and takes a lead, or he does something clever in a trade and goes back. We can't see any of those things. We just see the mini-map, and except for pro players scrimming against those players and telling us specific details, everyone's vastly limited on information in a way that didn't exist before. Now, a reason why this is interesting is because in the early days of StarCraft Brood War, not a lot of people know this, but in the early days, Westerners were competing with Koreans just fine. There was players like, there was a guy from Norway, who I forget the name of, who actually won like a huge competition in Korea. There was obviously Gur, who was the player, who was the French-Canadian player, and he went over and won the first ever OSL, the biggest competition in StarCraft Brood War. And one of the key details is, one of the things that allowed Koreans to get much better and then to take a massive lead is, yes, it's true, Koreans invented that method of incredible diligence and work ethic and practicing things by incredibly small details, building up your fundamentals, then playing so many opponents you mastered the metagame, and then getting all your strengths in place. But another detail was that when replays were brought out, some of the foreign players, the Western players, who might have been very creative, very innovative, very brilliant people, might come up with a great little play that they could do. And against another opponent who hadn't played that, they might be able to do that again and do it in a different fashion. But with replays, what would happen is people could just watch that, watch from his POV, watch everything he did, pick it out, start adding it to their game, figure out what he did, reverse engineer it, and quickly the Koreans added it into their game. So we can see actually it would improve League of Legends massively in all regions if replays were available, so that we could do this, so we could pick apart the minutiae of what a player did, how he did something brilliant, not just the overview aspect of it or seeing part of it and then skipping away later in the game because we have to follow 3 different lanes, we have to follow 5 different players on the map for each team. So then there's also the scenario that if we had replays, think of how incredible some of the movies that you could make, the highlight clips that you could make about players would be, because there'll be games where you didn't catch that guy. Yeah, nowadays they have replays, they have other observers to get some of the extra features, but imagine being able to make a movie of Faker, and you've got every little play. You've got even clever little lane tricks he did, or something interesting of how he did a rotation here that wasn't captured in the footage. You could just have so much more to build your story with, to give to someone to then edit and make into a fantastic movie. Also, the solo movies would be fantastic, obviously. In terms of team scouting, this will provide so much more of. This is kind of what I was talking about with the Korean demo thing. But in terms of like a mixture of that and then doing what I did as a journalist, which is you want to scout, find out all this guy's tendencies, what he does with specific champions, the timings of when he does things. You could find all of this out much better, whereas at the moment those players largely have to scrim against that guy. They can get some of the basics, but then they're never going to quite have all the aspects. I mean, obviously you're not going to get the feel of playing him in any way unless you play him, but they're going to have a limited information compared to what they'd have with the replay. Also, it's the case that because we'd see everything from a player, and because the option would be there to go and see all 10 players and every action they did in the game, when people did this analysis, even fans who were fans of that player, they would then be able to come to a much more reasonable place of analysis or perspective on these players, because they could watch all aspects of the game. So if they wanted to be ignorant, they could just not watch them, but at least they'd have the option to do so. Now, Riot's reasoning as to why there aren't replays, they actually gave a quote on this. You remember they came out with all those comments about the sandbox mode and the replays. So I'll read it out. They said, replays for now. Well, this one was our bad. Not only did we promise replays at the launch of League of Legends, reminder, that was 2009, it's now 2016, at the launch of League of Legends, because we thought it was needed to get esports off the ground, maybe not in brackets, but by showing them on the PBE, we set the expectation that they'd be on the way soon TM. We backed off replays because the technical demands, server loads, backward compatibility, network stability, were so high that we knew it would be hard to do them right. These days, we also know that with our above priorities, replays just can't be a consideration until we clean up a lot of those systems. In the meantime, we're huge fans of the alternatives that the passionate community of developers outside of Riot have created, and we're looking into ways to highlight and support those good folks. So, okay, first of all, the issues they mentioned. So they mentioned server loads, backwards compatibility, and network stability. Now, first and foremost, in terms of like server load, network stability, since all other games that I'm aware of as esports games have this option for replays, and this is a key component of the history of esports, presumably what they're essentially admitting there is that their game is badly coded and still doesn't have many options to alter the game and actually functionally integrate replays so that you can actually have them exist as a thing and not ruin all the servers in the network. In that case, guess what? That's Riot's own fault. Yeah, on step one for making a game poorly at the beginning. But even now, okay, in the 7 years since then, why has Riot, as they should have done anyway, never upgraded to a new engine? Why have they not moved to a new aspect where it'd look better, all these other features were there? They could even purposely build the engine with things in mind that they didn't know about when they made League of Legends originally. They could have things like replays. So they haven't done any of that. So they've made a mistake, then they've continued to make more mistakes, then they've doubled down on those mistakes, and they're never at a position. They still haven't given us a suggestion now that they're really going to do anything about it. They gave us some bullshit there where if you look at I'll just keep going on this part actually about the other demands. So then they also said, when they say about server loads and network stability, okay, I've got a quick solution for you right now. Sure, okay, so maybe for a replay that's a multi-person, all the views in the game. So for that replay, sure, we get it. Maybe in that scenario, you can't have that replay. So in the meantime, why not just give us an option where you can record a client-side replay just of your point of view for the whole game? Why not have that option there where you can just do this and then at least pro players could do that. For LCS, you could all do that. And then in theory, guess what? They would still be the 10. You just wouldn't be able to access one game and then look at all the point of views, but you could access any of the 10, and that'd be an easy way to do it, right? I mean, in China, for LPL, they had games where they streamed all 10 of the different perspectives on Spectator. Like, they each had their own stream that you could go to. You could go watch Flame play, you could go watch Imp play, and you could go watch God V play if it was an LGD match last year. I mean, that's the solution that they've had to come up with on the fly, because obviously there are no replays. We don't even have that in the West in this scenario. It's not like they are looking for alternatives like this. Like, that would be a way to offer an alternative, have extra streams for each match. They don't do that, of course. Then there's the aspect of when they talk about backwards compatibility. Now, this is another thing that sounds, if you don't come from any other game, like, oh yeah, maybe it is just really hard with all the patches to keep the backwards compatibility. You know, in every other game that's been solved. Like in Quake games, there were ways that you could add in extra files that you needed to be able to play the old demo, or in Counter-Strike where you actually needed different versions. Someone who was very clever made a demo player that contained the bare minimum of those versions. It was quite small, and as a result could access that and put it into your computer, like, not your computer, could obviously put it into your game so that then it worked the game through that basically, and as a result you could watch any version of demo in Counter-Strike from any history. So there are solutions out there which the community could come to if these replays existed. It's not like Riot would have to do it themselves, although we know they famously do like to shut down community-driven things that are fantastic and better than theirs. Like when someone made their own client, if you remember that back in the day, and they shut that shit straight down. So then there's the issue that when they say all these things, server loads, backwards compatibility, network stability, yeah, it's 7 years in, guys. So 7 years in, what, still no solutions to any of those problems. You haven't even solved one of them. I'm calling bullshit on that. That makes it seem to me like either you're incompetent, you don't want us to do it, or you simply have given up on it, you know? I don't believe that it's impossible and that there's no solution, and that 7 years in, you're like, give me another 5 years and I might be ready then. No way. I mean, They say, oh, they want to support alternatives. Okay, like what? You mean like OPGG? How do you support that aside from giving them your API? What, like when that guy did the Spectate Faker thing to try and get all the games for us? Because, I mean, for all we know, what if Azubu didn't store all the VODs for Faker and we can't access them all? But that Spectate Faker guy would have had them all there. Oh, you shut that down, right? Yeah, and he called him an e-stalker and suggested that he was like trying to like ruin the person's job and you were protecting Faker. So much for supporting alternatives, right? Plus, you look at the phrasing of this PR thing, right? First of all, it has a whole bunch of memes in. Like, they think this isn't a big deal. Like, it's a joke to them. Like, haha. And if we put memes in, people will think we are talking at them. Like, yeah, we thought that it would get esports off the ground. Maybe not. Right, yeah, irrelevant to whether this gets esports off the ground, mate. I've just outlined a whole load of reasons why this would make esports better, why it would enhance your game and add to the history of the game. So maybe not like, haha, it's a joke, isn't it? Maybe not. We already made the game brilliant, isn't it? It's really big. Doesn't matter, mate. That's irrelevant to this particular issue here. Then saying that you put the expectation that they'd be ready soon TM. Well, no, you basically said that they were coming soon. Like, that's not the thing. Like, haha, soon TM. Like, I said soon, but maybe that means 10 years. No, you actually just said they were coming soon. Like, you basically promised them. You didn't in any way suggest like, oh, I'm working on a maybe one day. Like, you basically said they're coming. So that whole thing of like, haha, you thought it was soon. It was actually soon TM. Like, yeah, great joke, mate. This isn't a joke to me. This is esports history and trying to make this an actual fucking sport, not just a video game that one day's forgotten about. And then someone comes to me and goes, oh, I'm from the mainstream. Oh, I'm from the mainstream. Oh, I've heard about this team CLG that's like one of the best in NALCS. And I heard like they made it to the final of a last big international tournament. And I'm like, yeah, MSI, middle season. Yeah, they did. They made the final. And it was actually the first time an NA team had made the final of like a huge international tournament in quite a while. One of the Riot ones. And so that's quite significant. And they're like, oh, tell me more about CLG. And I'd be like, well, in season one, pre-season one, they were actually the best team at one point in time. Season one, again, they managed to get to the best team at one point in time, and they had a bunch of players like Hotshot GG and Saint Vicious, and some of these were the best in their world at their positions. Oh, cool, yeah, could you link me to like some games of that, or give me some information I can watch? Oh, sorry, you can't. What do you mean? Well, I mean, there's the odd VOD up there. Some of them are like pirated VODs that are still on YouTube and just haven't been taken down. But you can't just go and access all the games. What do you mean? Oh, well, I know what you're thinking. Like, you can go watch the NBA finals from a specific year and the NBA will have it themselves. But no, it doesn't exist in League of Legends, actually, mate. See, that isn't a joke to me. That's like you've actually destroyed the history of your own game there with your incompetence and your contempt for the game that you think, oh, it's succeeding anyway. Fuck it. Won't do any of the other stuff. Then there's the aspect where they put all this stuff in there. Like, not only did they put the part about the technical demands, but then they put all this stuff like, why do they say that? Okay, so they say like, oh yeah, we were going to do it and we wanted to do it. Okay, yeah, continue. Why don't you do it then? Well, you see, technical demands. Oh, okay, well, if it's technical demands, then no problem. We don't need to explain any further. No, but also, I mean, can't really be our top priority. Wait a minute, is it technical demands? Are you still working on it? Well, it's not really a top priority of ours, is it? Well, when will it ever be a top priority? When we fixed all those other things. Yeah, but why would you fix those other things if not to get the replays? Like, isn't that what you're going to have to do to get the Yeah, but if we were to fix all those other things, we aren't, by the way, soon TM, haha, maybe not. Then, then at that point in time, we would make the replays. Well, will you ever do that? Can't say. Not top of my priorities. Well, does that mean that those other things are top of your priorities? Don't really want to comment. Because, I mean, if they were top of your priorities, then you probably should be working on those. So at least I can expect the replays eventually, right? Sorry, I wasn't listening. What do you say? And then also that part where it's like, in the meantime, what fucking meantime? We waited 7 years, so could we have like a rough timeline? I'm not being picky. I'm not saying in a month, 6 months. How about in the next 2 years? Will there be any? When is this meantime? Is the meantime the rest of League of Legends' life, or is it the rest of my life? Even if League of Legends exists for all of history, then there's the part of like, oh yeah. So, I mean, we wanted to do them. We were going to do them. I know the expectations are that we're going to do them soon TM, but, we backed off because of the technical demands. And besides, it's not really top of our priorities anyway, because, we've got a lot on our plate. And, in the meantime, anyway, we'll just, support alternatives. Makes it sound at the end like you've just backed off so much. It's never coming, is it? And it sounds like you don't even think it's important still if you're Riot Games. So, yeah, I don't buy the whole thing. I think it's a joke that League of Legends is considered like the biggest esport game in the world. And yeah, okay, how much more money do you have to make? How much more successful does it have to be before you'll ever fix this and put in place a simple feature that every other esports game I know of exists with, and is actually quite crucial to allowing people to curate, analyze, and emphasize the great things about your game and create a history and a story behind it, instead of making it just this little product that you have. And it's like, well, beyond that, I don't really want any more done with that. Brilliant. Yeah, cheers. Thanks, mate.